Welcome, LA Progressive, friends and family. Today this is Sharon Kyle of the LA Progressive, and I am sitting in conversation with Kshama. Am I saying your name correctly? Is it Kshama or is it Shama?
The letters KSH are one letter in Sanskrit and they go ksha. There's a very slight K, but it's totally okay. It's hard for Indians to say. You can just call me Shama. Just pretend the K is silent.
Okay, Kshama Sawant, who is an Indian American economist and socialist politician known for bringing left politics into elected office in the United States. And Shama served on the Seattle City Council for a decade, making her one of the most visible socialist elected officials in the country. But today she's running for another office, and that's what we're going to be talking about, what it is to be an independent running for Congress. Kshama, welcome to the LA Progressive.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharon.
So the first thing that I've really been curious about, I know that you are an Indian American. I'm not sure that I know when you came to the United States, but even more than that, I want to know what informs your politics, what has gotten you to where you are today from where you were in India as a little child.
Yeah, thank you for asking me that because I think my journey is probably not uncommon at all. And so hopefully it will resonate with many of your viewers and listeners that so many of us actually, as I did growing up in India, wondered about why we were living in a society where on the one hand you had a few extremely wealthy people, and then on the other hand you had um, a veritable ocean of poverty and misery and suffering. That was the overwhelming thought that I grew up with. I think it is fair to say that I was absolutely obsessed with that question throughout my childhood. And there was a part of me that felt either everybody else is crazy or I'm crazy, that they are not as obsessed with that question as I am. And so that was the earliest memory that I can remember that gripped my mind. And then when I came to the US, it was for me at that moment, I was in my early 20s. I was about 21 or 22 when I came here. And at first, the thought was that, well, because the United States is the richest country in the world, surely they have solved the problems of poverty, certainly the availability of basic infrastructure like housing, education, healthcare, transportation. And that was really the next part of my education, to understand that this is linked with the capital system itself. And that journey led me to Marxism. And actually, when I found Marxist ideas, it immediately clicked. That was what I was looking for. I knew I was looking for something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I would know what it was, what I was looking for once I found it. And that's exactly what happened when I encountered Marxist ideas just by a quirk of fate all the way in the Pacific Northwest after coming from India. I realized that is what holds me answer, in the sense that it has what Marxism is an explanation, a scientific explanation of why capitalism works in the way it does, and what is the actual solution to that. That is why I'm a revolutionary socialist, because I believe that from my scientific understanding that most of the problems we face in our society, all the way from gender and racial oppression to the climate crisis, are actually a result of a society divided by with the extreme division of between the working class and the ruling class, and that we need to work towards a society that is owned and operated by billions of people, which is socialism.
That's right. So you characterize yourself as a revolutionary socialist. And I imagine that in the United States, when the average person hears that definition or that declaration, they may be taken aback. How do you help to dispel any notion that this kind of radical politics is good for society? For those who think that it's bad for society, how do you dispel that?
It's a very good question. I think the starting point for us has always been, since 2013, when we ran our first socialist campaign for city council. The starting point has always been recognizing that actually, for the vast majority of the younger generations, and even people in their 40s, even 50s, I would say at this moment, a lot of people, especially in the younger generation, for them, the main feature of their thinking is a disenchantment with capitalism, with the status quo. They may not all articulate it to themselves as, oh, this is the capitalist system. But if you ask people just randomly walking down the street, do you think the system is working for you today? Most people will say, hell no, it's not. People are living from paycheck to paycheck. So many young people are saddled with student debt. We have seen massive, a massively persistent problem of racially biased police violence. We have seen, if you look at the evictions, African American women led households, single women led households are the most vulnerable to evictions. We've seen, 6 million foreclosures from the Great Recession, which affected the vast majority of the working class and the middle class, which took the brunt of the recession. And now we are seeing a cost of living crisis like never before. We are seeing a genocide in Gaza, imperialist war after imperialist war, and now ICE terror across the nation in so many cities. And so I think for most people, the predominant feeling is that we want to fight back. We need to fight to change society for the better. And so from all the way from 2013, I would say that for us, the barrier was never that we are saying we're socialists, but mainly, as you correctly said, Sharon, explaining what that means. What does it mean to be a socialist and a working class fighter? It means fighting for concrete demands. So in 2013, for example, when we ran for city council and we won our first election, the flagship demand that the campaign was built on was the $15 an hour minimum wage. We also called for taxing the rich. We called for renters' rights and rent control. And in fact, at that time, I remember working people would come up to me and say, is this for real? Like, is this actually a campaign where we're going to fight for $15 an hour? Because it was something that people were electrified by. People were electrified by that demand for $15 an hour. They were ready to fight. And so tens of thousands of people were energized by our message. And that is the only basis on which we won. We were a very small group of revolutionary socialists at the time. We were running against arguably the most prominent Democrat at the time on the city council. But we explained to people, this guy, Richard Conlin, I'm running against, he voted against paid sick leave for workers. And people were like, I don't even know this guy's name, but if he voted against paid sick leave for workers, then I am opposed to him. So we won people over on a class basis, not so much on whether they were going to call themselves socialist or not, which that was never the issue for us. The issue was, do you want to fight for 15? Do you want to fight for the Amazon tax? Do you want to fight for rent control? Then join us.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you're rejecting working inside the Democratic Party. So you are running as an independent socialist. But in a first past the post system, which is what we have, winner take all politics, the first one to get the majority, that structurally favors two parties. So how do you realistically scale independent socialist victories beyond deep blue urban districts?
Just to clarify, first of all, for the nature of the district that I'm running in, which is the 9th congressional district in Washington State. Washington State has a jungle, what's called the jungle primary rule, meaning everybody, regardless of party affiliation, runs in the same primary. So I'm not required to run in a Democratic primary. The Democratic incumbent that I'm running against, genocidal Democrat Adam Smith, and any other candidates, including the Republicans, there will be a few Republicans running in the race as well. We will all be running in the same primary, and the top 2 vote getters then go to the general election. And that itself, that process itself does not require anybody to be a Democrat or a Republican. And as you said correctly, Sharon, I'm running as an independent. But the truth is that this is not about process or logistical, electoral, systemic rules. This is about politics. And I've always been an independent. I've never run as a Democrat, or certainly not as a Republican. And even starting with 2013, when I ran for my first city council campaign, I ran as an independent socialist. And in fact, city council elections often are nominally nonpartisan, meaning on paper they don't declare their party affiliation, but in reality, every single other council member in Seattle is a Democrat. And they don't talk about being a Democrat, but they are Democrat. They support the Democratic Party. They follow the Democratic Party's agenda, which is primarily supporting the interests and greed of big business. So we turned the tables on the Democratic Party in Seattle by declaring over and over again that we are running as an independent because the Democratic Party is also hostile to the interests of working people and oppressed communities. And in reality, far from being the supposed lesser evil, the Democratic Party, along with the Republican Party, is one of the two most powerful parties of global capitalism. And working people can only effectively fight back if we build independent movements, meaning movements independent of the Democrats and Republicans.
So you're known for being a movement builder, and that's excellent. Are you looking at this run for this congressional seat as one of the legs in your movement building process?
It absolutely is integral to the movement building process. What is I mean, there are many things that are fundamentally different between the campaigns we have run as revolutionary socialists to every other campaign, including the progressive Democrats and those who have run from the Democratic Socialists of America in the Democratic Party. There's a fundamental difference. One of those differences is that we don't run, and I use the pronoun we deliberately because it has never been about building my career. For us, the the election campaigns from the very beginning have been part of our efforts to build fighting movements and to win victories. And so when we ran our first campaign in 2013, we made it very clear that this campaign is a vehicle to build the fight for the $15 minimum wage, which we ended up winning within 6 months of me taking office in 2014. It's a movement to win taxes on the rich, to build affordable housing, which we then won in 2020. And it's a movement to win renters' rights, many of which we won throughout our decade there. And once again, similarly, in this congressional campaign that we have launched now, when the primary will be in August, we are making it very clear this campaign is something that everybody should join. All working class people and all community members should join if they want to fight alongside us to end the genocide in Gaza and permanently end all US military funding for the Israeli state, if we want to shut down ICE and the detention centers and to stop all the deportations, if we want to win a national $25 an hour minimum wage, if you want to win national rent control, if you want to win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. These are all demands that are prominent in our campaign. And when I say prominent, I don't mean just they sit on our website. This is what we talk about all the time when we talk to the people in our district and working people across the nation to build our campaign, for them to get involved in our campaign. And so our campaigns have always been very, very important vehicles to build movements. And then when we have won the elections, and we won every single election, we won 4 elections as a revolutionary socialist for the city council, every moment that I was in office was used to build movement. So my elected office itself was used as a vehicle to build mass movements, which is the only reason that we were able to win the victories we won. Because the ruling class doesn't fear only me. What they feared is my willingness and ability to use my office to build mass movements. And they fear the anger of the masses. They fear the wrath of the masses. They especially fear an organized resistance by working class people, where working people are able to cut across racial and nationalistic divisions and come together as a class, come together as a working class. One other thing I should mention is that at this moment, unfortunately, Sharon, what we are facing is not a shortage of mass anger. In fact, what we have, this moment in US history is tens of millions of working people who are angry and fired up to fight back. The consciousness, I would describe it as dry kindling. People are ready to fight. We've seen the anger against ICE terror, the anger against the genocide. It's a historic moment where the majority of American people, which has never happened before, are against Israel. They're against genocide. They are in solidarity with the Palestinian people, the majority of them. And yet, what we have in contrast on the other side is a complete a complete absence of leadership on the part of the labor leadership, on the part of NGO leaders, unfortunately also Democratic Socialists of America leaders, all of them are in some shape or form allowing the political establishment to carry out this murderous agenda that has been going on against working people and also, abroad. And so what we need more than anything else right now, Sharon, is a big breakthrough nationally that can help us build the kind of leadership we need to actually build a general strike to shut down ICE and to end the genocide, to end all US military aid, to actually win victories on free healthcare by taxing the rich. That breakthrough is not going to come from the labor leadership because they're too compromised right now. It is not going to come from DSA leaders either. We're seeing Mamdani endorse corporate Democrats. So we cannot have faith in them. We have to build independently. And that is why there is no question in my mind. If we can win this election, which we have a real shot to win, then it will be nothing short of a political earthquake to build those kinds of movements nationally.
So you've already demonstrated through the passage of the 15 minimum wage in Seattle years ago, you've already demonstrated that this is possible. Why hasn't that momentum translated into national transformation?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just on the 15, just to share that we not only won the $15 minimum wage here, which obviously became the first major city minimum wage. I mean, that news went viral internationally. But then on top of that, in that fight, we also won inflation increases, Sharon. And the Democrats fought us tooth and nail, for everything they fought against us. And we had to fight back, building a movement. And we won inflation increases. And so today, Seattle's minimum wage is $21.30 an hour, which is the highest in the nation. And on top of that, because we won here, tens of millions of workers, including in Los Angeles and many other cities, won higher wages as well. And that has been a lifeline because people are finding it so hard to get by. That has been a crucial lifeline. It's not enough, but it has been a crucial lifeline. And so, to answer your question, why didn't this happen on a much bigger scale? The answer is that in order to do what we did, I mean, how we won the victories, the lessons of how we won the victories, it requires the leadership of movements, just as we demonstrated through my elected office. It requires the leadership of movements to never sell out. And what that means is you have to understand, as I did, that when you enter City Hall or the US Congress or become the New York City mayor, regardless of which office it is, when the Democrats and Republicans who are in office, they are not your work colleagues. They are your class enemies. If you say you're fighting for the working class, then you don't understand that the Democratic and Republican parties represent the ruling class and they are the class enemies of the working class, then it's a fatal mistake. And regardless of whatever your good intentions might be, you will fail the working class because your instinct will be to make friends with them, to have work out compromises with them behind the scenes, to try to make peace with them. But Sharon, the road to making peace with the bosses and their parties is the road to betraying the working class. And there's forever this question, and I get asked this question a million times, like, but isn't there a way to win all the victories you won? Because I support that, but do you have to be this way? Like, do you have to be fighting all the time? Can't you just be making peace with the Democrats? No, it's an illusion. The idea that you can make peace with the parties of the bosses or with the bosses themselves and win something for the working class, that is an illusion because the interests of the bosses, interests of the billionaires and multimillionaires, and the parties that represent them are diametrically opposed to the needs of the workers. So this idea of trying to make peace between them is an illusion. And if you fall for that illusion, you end up betraying the working class. And the first step towards that betrayal, Sharon, is when candidates run as Democrats. You've seen so many people. Bernie Sanders ran as a Democrat in 2016. I publicly told him, you can't run a political revolution against the billionaire class from inside the party of the billionaire class. You have to run independent. He didn't listen. And since then, of course, he has capitulated far more to the Democratic Party's agenda. But then you also seen squad members like AOC, Democratic Socialist leaders like Zohran Mamdani, all of them make peace with the billionaire class and with the Democratic Party. What has happened? you've seen betrayal after betrayal. With all the squad members and all the progressives in Congress, we don't have a national $15 minimum wage. The federal federal minimum wage is still a disgraceful $7.25. It is disgraceful. We are nowhere close to universal health care. In fact, the Democrats even refused to give us a solid public option. They even refused to make the ACA tax subsidies permanent. And now more and more millions of people are bereft of health care. And you've seen Zoran Mamdani make deals with billionaires. You've seen him endorse Kathy Hochul, who is a Zionist governor and also has been a strike breaker against the ongoing nurses' strike in New York City. He has endorsed Hakeem Jeffries, who is a genocidal Democrat. And so that road only leads to that type of betrayal. And that is why, since I was, when I was first elected in 2013, that was a novelty. People were like, oh my God, this is the first socialist in 100 years. But then you had hundreds of people get elected in the name of being socialist, including AOC. You have 250 Democratic Socialists of America elected officials, but not one of them has been able to win anything like we have won. And so this is not a game of arithmetic. It's not a game of, oh, let's win more such people, in the Democratic Party and we can win something. No, with one office, we showed what can be done that hundreds of others haven't done. And that's because of our clarity that we need to build independent fighting movements.
Absolutely. I think we absolutely need to build independent fighting movements, and not just people who carry the word or the name socialists, but we don't see any major change. And we still have a $7.25 federal minimum wage. Your advocacy of a $25 federal minimum wage, I think it should be sort of the flagship statement about your campaign. Can you tell me what surprised you when you came into office as the Seattle City Council representative? Give me something that surprised you that you felt was positive, and something that surprised you that was negative.
I can give you a positive and negative example. Maybe not so much of something that surprised me, but something that, in a way, it even confirmed what I suspected might be true. So one thing that I was pleasantly surprised by and really was heartened by is how much ordinary people, Sharon, ordinary people were willing to fight, and how much courage and tenacity they have. I mean, just to give you one concrete example of that positive thing that you were talking about is a few months after we won the $15 minimum wage, so this was in the early autumn of 2014, we heard an Obama directive. This was a federal directive under Obama, which again, by the way, is an example of how the Democrats have attacked ordinary people and working people and poor people. It was a directive to destroy the public housing, affordable housing that had been won in the post-World War II era, and that again had been a lifeline for a lot of people, especially Black and immigrant families, working poor families. And that directive came to Seattle in the name of, it was an Orwellian name. It was called Stepping Forward. But what it was really going to do was increase rents by 400% over the subsequent 6 years if that program had gone through. And like I said, it was a program that was put forward in many different cities where there was federally subsidized public housing. And at that time, we had so many Somali and other, American Black women-led households, single women-led households, who were going to be devastated if that policy had gone through. And meaning my fellow socialists and I, we really wanted to fight against Stepping Forward, but we weren't sure if the households themselves, the people, the tenants themselves would fight, because they had no experience with any kind of political activism. We had to literally start at ground zero, meaning literally showing them how to hold up a placard, why it's important that they show up, why the numbers of protesters matters, why they have to chant, why they can't be shy, why it doesn't matter that they can't speak English fluently, but they still have to fight, why they have to bring their children as well, and why the whole family has to be there fighting for their housing. And what amazed us and humbled us was the incredible political clarity that they had. I mean, that to me, it was a moment that confirmed my Marxist understanding of the working class, which is that the working class has the instinctive understanding of how to fight back. What has been missing is leadership. So under our leadership, these women and children, actually young people, they blossomed into fighters, and they all fought back. We actually, the stepping forward program, the administrators under Obama, they came and they were holding what they called information sessions or listening sessions or something like that, where they thought, oh, they're just going to easily put this program forward, destroy the housing for these people. They're not going to fight back because what do they know? These people, the working people, the tenants, they completely turned the tables on them. So we turned every so-called listening session into a protest. And the last listening session, we turned into a walkout. It was at a community center. We all, hundreds of us, walked out, and then we held our own community meeting in a basketball court in that community center. And that was the moment when the establishment knew they had lost. And a few days later, they announced that they were ending that program, and we saved all the housing. So that was the moment where we realized, actually, there is real potential among the working class to fight back. It doesn't matter whether you speak the language, doesn't matter whether you've been a political activist before, you can do it. The flip side, the negative side, is how vicious the Democratic Party politicians are. Unfortunately, also the NGO leaders and the labor leaders are. That really stunned me. And it was a real lesson for us, all of us, not just for me, to understand what we are up against. And, so one of the, I'll just say this, one of the crucial things, it's a make or break at this moment, if we are to succeed in our movements, is to understand the role of gatekeepers. And when I say gatekeepers, I mean people who might look like us, who might be a labor leader, who might be a BLM leader, and we might want to believe that they are on our side. Surely they must be on our side because they're speaking at these movement rallies, they're talking about labor rights, they're talking about Black rights. But in reality, they are there to give cover to the Democratic Party and big business, and take away, siphon off the movement's energy, and uh, to sort of mislead people. So really, I call them gatekeepers or misleaders. And we saw this in BLM. The BLM movement was the strongest movement, street protest movement in US history. But the victories won by the movement are not commensurate to the strength of the movement. Why? Because many of these so-called leaders, self-appointed leaders, they ended up taking money for their own NGOs and ended up betraying the actual ordinary people who were on the ground. And one example of that was in 2020, when many of these supposed leaders, whom I call misleaders, they told us that was the year when we were fighting for our Amazon tax. They told us a tax Amazon is not a Black issue. You can't speak here. I was told many times, you're not Black, you can't speak here. And we refused to accept their gatekeeping. We said, we want to know what ordinary Black people feel, ordinary people of every race who have been protesting in these protests, BLM protests, what do they feel? And when we went to them directly, oh my God, the Amazon tax was such a popular issue amongst all of them. And it was thanks to the rank and file of the BLM movement, of the George Floyd rebellion, that we were able to win the Amazon tax.
Yes, yes. And just in full disclosure, I worked very closely with BLM, and there was a hijacking of the BLM movement by an organization that is now calling themselves BLM Global Network. But the BLM grassroots is the real BLM and would never have done what you've just characterized. But you are absolutely right. There's a group of people who actually stole the money that BLM was donated to BLM by thousands of people after the murder of George Floyd. That money was stolen, and there have been court cases, and there's still a lot going on in the courts. But that's all I'll say on that issue. So this is really exciting that you are both campaigning and movement building, and you're campaigning for a federal seat, a congressional seat. Do you believe that this type of election, the electoral politics as they are currently conducted, really benefit the two-party system and is inherently hostile to working class parties?
Certainly, the two parties are absolutely hostile to the working class, and their whole system is the whole system of capitalism and everything that goes along with it, all the institutions and the apparatus, the police department, the criminal justice system, ICE, all the law enforcement, all the other agencies, many of them, they are primarily geared towards, and the electoral system as a whole, it is all geared towards making it very, very hard for independent politics to arise, making it very hard for working class people to put forward their agenda and build a fight back. So there's no doubt about any of that. The truth is, however, that uh, I wouldn't. I think that making a distinction, and this is often a very important question. So I'm really glad you're asking this, because it is correct for people to mistrust the Democratic and Republican parties. You absolutely should not have any faith in them because they are hostile to working people and oppressed communities. And uh, it is understandable if, based on that, people feel like, well, electoral politics is not fruitful and we should build movements. The problem is that it's a common thread of missing leadership across the board. So whether you look at social movements like the ones we've seen, including BLM, and you gave a very important illustration of how it was, BLM was hijacked, and actually BLM grassroots was representing the actual movement. But this happens in every social movement. It's not just there. It's happened in the immigrant rights movement. It's happened in women's rights movements. You see this environmental justice movement. You see this over and over again, where the leaders of these social movements, self-appointed leaders, because it's not like any election happened to make them leaders. They're self-appointed leaders. They end up supporting the Democratic Party, taking money for their own pet NGOs, and then they end up not fighting for what the movement was actually fighting for. So you see this problem in the social movement as well. And then you see it in the labor movement dramatically. This problem exists. Most of the labor leadership right now is what I would call business unionist, meaning they believe in making deals with the bosses, not really going on a class war against the bosses, and not a militant fight back against the bosses. And they are also, the labor leaders are also tied to the Democratic Party, except for Teamster leader Sean O'Brien, who is now making overtures towards Donald Trump, which is even worse than the Democratic Party. But on the whole, the labor leadership has failed us. I mean, look at right now. There's a clamoring nationally for a general strike, but the labor leadership has refused to organize one. In fact, that is what's needed in this moment, a general strike against ICE terror and against the Trump regime. That is what we need. But the labor leadership is refusing to do that because they are also tied to the same system, the Democrats and Republicans who have both created ICE and funded ICE. And the same thing exists in the electoral sphere as well. The Democrats and Republicans who are both, both hostile to the working class. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that presenting it as a question of electoral politics versus movement politics, it's a false dichotomy because it doesn't help us understand that we have the same problem across the board, which is an absence of principled fighting leadership. And that principled fighting leadership has to be built from somewhere. There has to be an original point somewhere. And for us, it's just a practical reality that we would not be able to run, my fellow socialists and I, we would not be able to bring this kind of program, this kind of fight back through just one or two of us being rank and file in the labor movement. It's just not possible. That is why we are running this election campaign, because for us, it's the best possible platform right now to be able to win a breakthrough victory for the working class. So for us, the question is never electoral or not. The question is at every moment, which is the best possible avenue to give us the biggest breakthrough for the working class. And like I said, for us, it's never been about my career, about or my convenient life. I mean, it's never been that. In fact, if I wanted a convenient life, there are a million better ways for me to make that happen. The life as a working class fighter is actually very hard because we are going up against some very powerful entities. And throughout my city council work, I took home only the average worker's wage and donated the rest of my lavish city council salary into a working class solidarity fund. That is what I'm pledging to do that again if we win this election to Congress. And for us, this is going to be the biggest breakthrough as far as the working class is concerned. That is why we're building the election campaign. At a different moment in the future, elections may not be the main thing we should focus on, and it should be other things. But regardless of anything, this election campaign is very much, as you said earlier, it is about building fighting movements.
Absolutely. And it certainly is people-centered as opposed to the elitists centered elections that we've seen in the past. And, you know, I'm always looking at, well, why is it that way? And it's that way because money plays such a key role in elections and campaigns. And speaking of money, I've always encouraged anyone to contribute to any race, regardless of whether you live in the congressional district or whether you go. It's a federal seat. And if you win, the entire nation will be impacted, especially because of your zeal and your belief in what you believe in. And I think that most of us actually do believe in what you believe in, which is universal health care and just a better life for all of us, and not appealing to the affluent, but appealing to the needs of the people. So for people who would be interested in supporting your campaign, how would they go about doing that?
They can contact us at kshamasawant.org. It's my first name and last name, no other punctuation. It's Kshama Sawant, one word, .org. Or you can search my, Google my name and it shows up. Yeah, I really agree with you, Sharon, that this is a national campaign. It doesn't matter where you live. I also strongly believe, as you do, that the things that we are fighting for, that is something that the majority of working class people agree with us about. And so if you're watching this, please get involved in our campaign. Please donate to our campaign. In fact, already our campaign has raised close to $450,000 through working class donations. Our median donation is $25. Obviously, if you're able to give more than 25, we really need you to make that sacrifice, because that is the only way we can run this campaign. And in fact, our campaign has so much has already made so much of an impact that we have donations from every state in the nation and from Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. So really, please see this as your campaign, no matter where you live, because if we win, as you said, it will make a national impact, and it will allow us to build movements that can build across the nation, it's not just about this Seattle area and this congressional district. If we can win, we will be building, I have pledged, we will be building movements, and I have pledged that if I'm elected, I will turn my congressional inauguration in Washington, D.C. into a rally of 10,000 people, and I will immediately use my elected office to launch movements to shut down ICE, to end all U.S. military aid to Israel, and to win free healthcare for all by taxing the rich.
And don't forget that $25 an hour.
Yes, absolutely. The $25 an hour minimum wage, like you said, it has to be a flagship demand.
That's right. That's right. Well, Kshama, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You are such a visionary. You have so much energy, and you have the answers that we're all looking for. Thank you so much for doing what you do. And is there any final thing that you'd like to say before we end?
Thank you so much, Sharon. First of all, yes, thank you for covering the story about this campaign, because it's so crucial that more and more tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people hear about this campaign, because it's so crucial. I mean, just to say, this campaign, our campaign in this midterm election, is the only campaign that is fighting to shut down ICE and end all US military aid to Israel. You will see a lot of quote unquote progressives running who will say, oh yeah, I'm on the side of the Palestinian people, I'm on the side of working class people, but not one of them is calling for a $25 an hour minimum wage. And certainly not one of them has the kind of track record that we have of actually winning victories and overcoming the obstacles that are thrown in our path by billionaires, by multimillionaires, by the Democrats, by NGO leaders, and by labor leaders. So I really hope that your audience is energized by our message, and that you will all join us. And just one last thing I'll mention is that on Sunday, February 22nd at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, we're organizing in Seattle, but it will be live streamed, so it's irrelevant for everybody. We're going to be organizing a mass meeting to talk about the strategy of how to actually make a general strike happen.
Thank you again, Kshama Sawant. We're wishing you the best, and we look forward to touching base again sometime in the near future.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Bye-bye. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.